Yep.
Welcome,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, to episode 6 of Pigskin Glory. Tonight, we're into December. As you can see, it's the Christmas season. We're into December 1st through the 10th of 1975 is what we'll be discussing tonight. And we are filming this on December 14th, 2025, a big win for the Bills. So instead of representing 75, tonight I'm representing Buffalo. Joining me, as always, I'm Vinnie Vincent, and joining me, as always, we have our expert panel. On the bottom of the screen, from the California Bay Area, our baseball expert and 49er fan, alumnus of San Jose State University, Charles.
Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say.
And to my right, from the Wisconsin area, he doesn't put cheese on everything because he was born in Buffalo, a blue cheese dipper himself, Chris.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm feeling pretty good after the 20. This, unlike 1975, this time we were on the right side of a 21-point AFC East comeback.
All right, let's take a look at where we begin with, and we are beginning with comic strips, and it is the Charlie Brown has decided to delve into football. Marcy and Peppermint Patty, not Charlie Brown and Lucy.
I know!
Chris, Charles Schultz. We know he always included football in at least usually making Charlie Brown look bad, but how about getting Peppermint Patty and Lucy involved? Or not Lucy, sorry, Marcy.
Well, they're trying to expand the empire, but if the only shame of it is we never got to see if Marcy or Peppermint Patty could kick a ball, because we all know Lucy was always pulling the ball away from Charlie, and we never got to find out. Or as Peppermint said, "You were trying a trick play on me, weren't you, sir?" So I guess we'll never. So I guess we'll never find out the question: Can anyone in the Peanuts group kick a ball?
Charles, in 1975, could the 49ers use a tackler like Marcy?
At 5-6 record, maybe we do. Maybe we could for next year.
They need a quarterback more than a tackler.
With our college of quarterback over the last 2 years, I think we had 5 quarterbacks last year, 1974.
This year you've got old Norm Snead, and Spurrier may go in the expansion drafts, and Spurrier may end up getting picked by a expansion team. So you may have to find someone else, and Spurrier may not come back.
And of course, tonight's game is Miami and New England. Miami wins their game up on Baltimore and Buffalo, and the Patriots, well, they're reduced to playing the role of spoiler.
As Charles just said, it is a Monday night. Monday Night Football is coming up Monday, December 1st. But before we get there, Milton Richmond's Sports Parade talks about Terry Bradshaw is a solid in Noel's scheme of play. Charles, when Terry Bradshaw's career began in 1970, there was a lot of talk about him being a draft bust. Now that he's won a Super Bowl and is potentially leading the Steelers to back-to-back titles, has he earned the respect of the sport writers around America?
Yes. If you win 2 Super Bowls, you better the sports writers better give him the respect. I think the play that defined his career was that immaculate reception against the Raiders in 1972.
Chris, in the last 50 years, we've heard Terry Bradshaw all the time say he called his own plays. Of course, that's commonplace back in 1975, but perhaps Bradshaw might have missed a second career calling as an offensive coordinator.
Absolutely. And think about how far Bradshaw has come. Before the 1974 playoffs, Sports Illustrated described the Steelers as the only playoff team without a quarterback. What a difference a year makes.
No doubt. So Morrill and the Dolphins will go against the Pats tonight. Here's a preview. Earl Morrill, who famously didn't see Jimmy Orr in Super Bowl III, but is a steady backup. And with Bob Greasy's toe injury, Charles, Earl Morrall is the Dolphins' key to getting into the playoffs. Can the New England Patriots put a pressure on 41-year-old Morrall and stop the Dolphins in their tracks?
I depend on who starts for the Patriots. I don't think Steve Grogan is ready.
Jim Plunkett ain't ready, and at the
Chris, Earl Morrall is 41 years old, and it's unheard of, really. I mean, George Blanda's still playing with the Raiders, even older than that. He's 46, but he doesn't start at quarterback. He's just their kicker. Can Morrall survive the pressure on a Monday night at that age?
well, he's playing the right team. You know, he's playing New England, whose defense at times has been abominable this year. It's not like he's playing one of the better AFC teams. And remember, you know, he did have, now, of course, it should be noted, when he did have to come in last week, he had to play the Baltimore Sack Pack. New England is not the Sack Pack.
Well, it's time for the game. The Patriots versus Dolphins. Miami runs past New England 20-7. Last December, the Patriots blew a 24-point lead at the Orange Bowl in 74. This year, they couldn't even muster that many points. The Dolphins ran for 199 yards and allowed but one garbage time score in yet another New England loss at Florida. Miami stopped their two-game skid, but it came at a high cost. Earl Morrall was injured. Now, the Dolphins are starting at the prospect of facing Buffalo and Baltimore with third-string quarterback Don Strock. Many think 1975 has been Don Shula's best coaching job yet. This might be the greatest test yet. Charles, they've got to go to Don Strock. Are the Dolphins done?
Don Strock is solid as a rock, then no. But he's their only option. Then the Dolphins could be in trouble, and that's where the Buffalo Bills or Colts might pounce.
Chris, what do we know about this Don Strock, the third stringer in Miami?
Well, I know he used to play at the University of Virginia Tech, and he and Don McCaskey were pretty much the most notable Hokie alumni pre-Michael Vick.
Now, meanwhile, this touchdown, a norm that Boston doesn't want to know his name. So as you can see here, Morrall throwing to Norm Bulash, and he gets in from
I guess this storm sent the Patriots for clap.
a 6-yard touchdown run. Nice color photo we have, or color video we have. Looks like original TV broadcast. Again, not a lot exists from these earlier Monday night games, but this one we have.
If you heard this before, the Patriots lose at the Orange Bowl.
And starting Tuesday morning, we go to a new cover photo. Here's an action.
10 years ago.
Here's an action shot of Fran Tarkenton throwing against the Washington Redskins, and the dancing bear Ron McDowell, former Buffalo Bill, and Talbert leading the charge against Fran. Of course, we talked about that Redskins-Vikings game in episode 5 of Pigskin Glory. The Minnesota Vikings undefeated no more. Let's take a look at the NFL standings. First in the AFC. We have a playoff clincher in the Oakland Raiders, but they're not the number one seed. They've just clinched their division. Pittsburgh is your number one seed.
That's because the Steelers are at 10-1. And who had the tiebreaker over Pittsburgh and Oakland? Who had the tiebreaker?
I believe that Pittsburgh would, because remember, Oakland's 2 losses. Remember, Pittsburgh has beaten Cincinnati. The Bengals beat the Raiders. Remember, Oakland lost at Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh's already won there.
So
there you go.
Your 1 seed, Oakland's your 2 seed, Miami is your 3 seed, and your wild card is Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati cannot go to Pittsburgh because of the rules. So Cincinnati would go to Oakland, and Miami would go to Pittsburgh if the AFC playoffs began there. So a lot of the same teams. It's not the Bengals' first time in the playoffs. Buffalo and Baltimore are still just a game behind with 3 games to go. So it's not over. And Houston's not out of the wild card, 2 games back. In the NFC, you got your 1 seed, even though they lost. Minnesota's still your 1 seed. Frigid Bloomington, Minnesota hosting playoff games. The Rams are the 2. Dallas, by virtue of a tiebreaker, is currently sitting at the 3. And your wildcard team would be St. Louis. The Cardinals would have to freeze their butts off and fly up to Minnesota for the winner, while Dallas would go to Los Angeles. Chris, Dallas right now is back in position to be in the playoffs, but the Redskins are only a game back, and there's some important games left in December for the NFC East.
First of all, Dallas has the tiebreaker over St. Louis because they beat them in week 2, but the Cowboys are in a very precarious situation. They play the Cardinals and the Redskins over the next 2 weeks. So basically, they got to take care of business because if they fall to 8-5, they could be out of it again. Because remember, this is where those Green Bay and Kansas City losses are starting to bite them.
Charles, the NFC Central and West already wrapped up. The Vikings and Rams have clinched. The rest of the teams now go into spoiler mode. The Lions could still be alive for a wild card.
So
Clinching
they're
the
gonna
division
have to
so
win.
early.
They're gonna have to win the remaining 3 games and hope the Cardinals lose the remaining 3 games and hope the Redskins lose twice.
Detroit actually hosts St. Louis in the final game of the season, but a lot has to happen for that to matter for Detroit.
Yes.
Now there's still room to wiggle here with the Vikings and Rams. The Vikings have not clinched the number 1 seed, so they still have stuff to play for. Is clinching too early potentially a risk though for whatever team doesn't get home field to maybe lose perspective and drive toward the Super Bowl?
No, because I don't believe it. In a 14-game schedule, you clinch whenever you have a chance to, because remember, you have fewer games, which means first chance to get in, you got to get in.
And you got a chance to rest on your players. Make sure if you clinch early, you only have 1 check in the remainder of the regular schedule. Don't get hurt.
Now, the regular season in college football is all but wrapped up. We are marching toward the first bowl game this weekend, which is the Governor's Cup in Maryland. Here's how the top 20 looks in the Associated Press after 11 weeks. Ohio State getting 50 votes as number 1. They're undefeated. So is Texas A&M, who plays in that Governor's Cup at 10-0. They got 7 first-place votes, followed by Oklahoma getting 1. As far as our teams go, looking down the line, he's not here with us tonight, but Mark's Penn State is number 8. My Georgia Bulldogs are 12. Charles, your San Jose State fell out of the top 20 after their loss this past weekend. Still a great season in 75 for the Spartans.
Yep.
Chris, how are the bowl games going to shape the national championship?
Well, the A&M Arkansas game is not impactful because A&M or Arkansas plays Georgia in those games. Actually, if A&M beats Arkansas and they're 11-0 and they beat the Junkyard Dogs, if A&M potentially runs the table and Ohio State slips up, A&M could win the championship because they'd be potentially the only undefeated team because there's a path for A&M, but they need to win out and the Buckeyes need to slip up.
Yes, you are right. I misspoke when I said the Governor's Cup was this coming Saturday. It's the following Saturday. A&M is playing Arkansas this weekend to wrap up their regular season, as they're only 10-0, and the Razorbacks as well are 8-2, only playing 10 games. That is a top 20 matchup, though, Arkansas versus Texas A&M. Well, folks, the Downtown Athletic Club has made their decision. It's now Wednesday, December 3rd, and Archie Griffin is your first ever 2-time Heisman Trophy winner. Charles, is this well received?
The second straight Heisman Trophy.
Yes.
What
Yes.
that's pretty impressive. Especially when you consider that you have to go up against maybe 100 other quarterbacks over 100 different schools to get a Heisman Trophy. I think it's more impressive at times than winning the MVP in any sport.
Chris, we talked about how great the running back depth was in college this year. Archie Griffin really pulled it out coming through. Who's the biggest Heisman snub in 75 that did not win it?
I think it probably might be Chuck Muncie because, Archie didn't have the touchdowns. And ironically, his 100-yard streak was snapped against Michigan. And don't forget, his teammate Pete Johnson has been scoring all the touchdowns. Charles, I actually think that if California had gotten to Pasadena or won one more game, I think Muncie might have had a chance to win it. Ricky Bell, the 4-game losing streak pretty much killed any chance Ricky Bell had.
Aha. That would do it.
It's weird looking back, though, from today's perspective, seeing the Heisman Trophy winner just being announced by your newspaper on Wednesday morning. The Buckeyes retain hold in the AP's top ratings. Another story about Ohio State's #1 rankings. We've already looked at that, so quickly I'm not going to talk too much about it. But pictured over on the right is Bud Moore, whose Kansas football team upset Oklahoma 23-3 earlier this season, was named the Big 8 conference coach of the year. Kansas finished the season at 7-4 and will play in the Sun Bowl against Pitt. Chris, winning coach of the year in a conference might not be remembered down the line 50 years from now, but it's still an impressive feat, especially when you look at the Big Eight, and see that Oklahoma and Nebraska are in that same conference, and yet Bud Moore is the one who won the Coach of the Year award.
Don't forget Colorado's in that conference. So those are the big three of the Big Eight. And when you're one of those other teams that's just trying to get their act together, I mean, no, but Kansas is a basketball school. And the fact that they were able to have a winning record, go to the Sun Bowl, beat Oklahoma in Oklahoma, he definitely deserved that award.
December 4th now, we've got some college transactions. Western Illinois' Brody Western, head football coach, has resigned. And Mississippi State's Tom Good, offensive line coach, has also resigned. Not a lot to talk about there, just keeping college coaching names in the news.
Tom Good, bad.
NFL preview here on Friday now, December 5th. Baltimore's pleasure, the midweek cartoons. The Cardinals plan tighter security and injury-riddled Mendenhall. Oh, that's something different, Mendenhall. So Baltimore's pleasure, let's take a look if we can scroll in real quick. Let's see, 26 official fan clubs called the Colt Corral, all the way from Newcastle, Delaware. Nostalgia's tough to fight.
Joe Eberman has this to say about the Colts. We're the new Colts. Old jocks get along. A lot of Lambda's team is just part of my personality. We're all young, so naturally we have a lot in common.
Chris,
Joe Ehrman, member of the Sack Pack.
Chris, there's a quote here about their weekly poker game being taken more seriously. Do you think that the Colts' relaxation is what their key to their resurgence in 75?
I think it's not just relaxation, but again, low expectations. They were 2-12 last year, and all the talk this year was about Miami and of course the Bills offense, and it feels like Baltimore just snuck up on everybody when all the talk has been about the Dolphins and the Bills.
Good point. All right, we have some
NFL. How are the Patriots sneaking up on a lot of teams this year under the radar
with theirs?
We have some NFL transactions to report on for this Friday. As New England has waived safety Dick Kahn and replaced him on the roster with defensive tackle Jerry Patton. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs have acquired punter Jim McCann to replace their injured Gerald Wilson. Now, it seems like Wilson's been punting in Kansas City forever, way back to their first Super Bowl run. So this is a notable roster transaction. But as far as, Jim McCann goes, I couldn't tell you much about him. Moving on, we've got NFL preview, and they talk about Don Strock, the Miami quarterback. 3 years ago, he led the nation in passing and total offense while at Virginia Tech. Since then, people have been asking, whatever happened to Don Strock? Well, Charles, Don Strock is now starting against the Buffalo Bills this weekend for the Miami Dolphins. Is his passing pedigree from college going to be able to pull him through and get the Dolphins another win over the Buffalo Bills, who they've not lost to since 1969?
If the Dolphins are in sync with Strock's passing abilities, then yes. The play calling has to be correct, just like any quarterback.
Chris, Don Strock, he's 6'5", he's over 200 pounds, but he's not thrown a pass in the NFL until last Monday night against the Patriots. Is he able to shake off the rust and get Miami through this weekend?
Well, he's going to have to, but remember, the Buffalo defense is very good with takeaways. Remember, you saw what they did to Jim Hart on Thanksgiving, and he's more experienced. The Don Strock's got to be careful, because if he turns it over the way Jim Hart does, if Buffalo can't beat Miami with the third-string quarterback and all those guys who weren't there before, if they can't beat him this year, when will they?
All right, we now move on to December 6th. It's Saturday morning, and Northern Michigan will play in the Pioneer Bowl today. The Pioneer Bowl, the Northern Michigan Wildcats, and against the no-huddle Livingston Tigers face each other in Saturday the Pioneer Bowl. It's the semifinal for the Division II football tournament. Northern Michigan's quarterback, Charles, is a name you might have heard of, Steve Mariucci.
Steve Mariucci. You're right. I have heard of him. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe why not a future Niner?
Yes, future 49ers head coach.
Future 49ers and Detroit Lions. In fact, when we get to December 14th or 13th, we have a touchdown featuring Steve Mariucci. But for now, they've got to get through Livingston first, I presume.
And we're not talking about Mike Livingston of the Chiefs.
No, Livingston College. All right, the Vikings have changed 2 starters, gentlemen. With the weekend being tomorrow, Andy Maurer will replace John Ward at left guard, and Fred McNeil will start at left linebacker in place of veteran Roy Winston. Those 2 big veteran changes, Ward and Winston out, Chris. Minnesota going with younger, not so recognizable names against Green Bay. How does this alter their game plan and the Packers' game plan going into this game?
Well, the left guard is going to be interesting because, Chuck Foreman's been having a great year. As for linebackers, remember, Minnesota's strength on defense is not the linebackers, it's the purple people eaters. It's Paul Krause. So for Minnesota, if you can get anything from your linebackers along with all those other guys, it's a bonus.
And let's not forget the Carl Eller on the Vikings defense.
It's Eller, it's Marshall, it's Page, it's Paul Krause. Anything you can get from the other guys is a bonus.
We got some more NFL preview. There's also a story here on the NHL attendance being down. But let's focus on Terry Bradshaw as he has a date in Nashville. Bradshaw, of course, many know that he's into country music. And it's, as he says, it's a long story. And it came about that he got a recording contract with Mercury Records. The distractions come when you win a Super Bowl, Charles. How big of a distraction could Bradshaw's recording contract could it sink the Steelers?
I don't think Terry Bradshaw can have more than one hobby, and who knows when his football career is over, he's gonna have a second career to fall back on country music.
Good point, Chris. The Cardinals are getting tough on their fans during the Thanksgiving contest. The stadium police will now eject anyone they see throwing snowballs. A team spokesman said on Thursday. Now, St. Louis doesn't get a lot of snow, but when they do, their fans get rambunctious, and the St. Louis is having a zero tolerance for that. What do you think of that ruling?
Oh, you got to crack down. And by the way, what happened was the Snowballs injured. It was the band. I think it was a band or band members that got injured. No Buffalo, from what I could tell. I don't think any Buffalo Bills were in the way of the Snowball, if you will. I think it was someone else on the field, not Lou Saban or any of the players.
Okay. Well, it's time to look at your Saturday afternoon games. There is an NFL game here, the Bengals and Eagles. Cincinnati blanks Philly 31-0 on a day the Bengals turned it over 6 times. Their defense more than made up for it with 5 takeaways of their own and holding the Eagles to 225 total yards. For Cincinnati, they got another shot at Pittsburgh next Saturday. For Cincy, they get another shot. As for Philly, when this team doesn't show up, they really don't show up. Today was reminiscent of their Monday night debacle in L.A. Charles, this game is featured at the beginning of the movie Invincible, as it is the end of, not the end, there's still a couple games left, but a pretty disappointing season in Philadelphia, and the catalyst that brings in a new football coach next year. But as for Cincinnati, they're still keeping their playoff hopes alive for a wild card run.
Absolutely. And remember, they need Pittsburgh. So the problem is Pittsburgh's playing Cleveland, and the Browns don't win in 3 Rivers. So basically, they need Pittsburgh to
have not one period.
One
2
little
games. Remember
side note.
2 games.
One little side note is I am in my first year of doing this date and touchdown history. I didn't think the NFL started Saturday games quite so early, so we don't have NFL touchdowns for this day, but we will have a college one before the day ends. Speaking of which, looking at, we've got some other college news. Tulane University has removed football coach Benny Ellender Friday, confirming an open secret. A search has begun for his replacement. Oops.
3 years ago, he went 9-3 and beat LSU.
Other information here is John McKay Nope. This is yes. John McKay has picked Utah State football coach Phil Kruger to work with him at the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not sure if Kruger's going to bring any nightmares to opposing offenses in the NFL, but he is joining McKay's staff.
Question though is, will Kruger approve of any offensive execution that McKay tries?
Here's some interesting news. When you think of college football, you don't always think about academics. Well, Ohio State are, as they are scholars too. Ohio State, the number one team in the land, is headed for the Rose Bowl, and the 5 Ohio State repeaters are this. Hold on, Ohio State is headed for the
Wingback.
Rose Bowl, and record tying 7 players on the team, including 5 repeaters from last year. Iowa had 5 players, the Northwestern 4. That is the all academic team. Ohio State places wingback Brian Bashnagel, defensive end Pat Curto, linebacker Ken Kuhn, defensive back Bruce Rule, and offensive guard Bill Lookerns, as well as offensive tackle Chris Ward and defensive tackle Tim Fox. Charles, how important is academics really for these
Very
players?
important. As a matter of fact, if you got a scholarship for football or any other sport, but you go for years on your scholarship and pursue a degree, whether it's economics or business or science or computer science or whatever. And if you go pro in basketball or sport, then great. But if you don't, which is the case for just about all but a few people, you at least you have a degree to fall back on.
Let's go over some of the other players selected to the all Big Ten academic team. Iowa tight end Brant Yoakum, offensive guard Jim Helgenberg. There's a name you might recognize. Defensive back Bobby Elliott, linebacker Dennis Armington, and place kicker Nick Quartero. Elliott, a Rhodes Scholar, and Yoakum and Hilgenberg are repeaters. Northwestern players on the team are punter Randy Dean, defensive back Pete Shaw, defensive tackle Marty Strostak, offensive guard Carl Peterson. There's a name that
By the
you
way,
might.
Vinny, I want to mention Carl Peterson. This is not the Carl Peterson that was the general manager of Marty Schottenheimer's Chief. This is not that Carl Peterson.
Well, I'm glad you told me that because I was about to say he was. Rounding out the honor unit are quarterback Tony Dungy from Minnesota, offensive tackle
There's
Jeff Stapleton of Purdue, defensive end Dan Gillak of Michigan, middle guard Tom Standel of Michigan State, and defensive tackle Joe Zwitt of Purdue. Now, to make this team, a player must maintain a 3.0 grade average on a 4.0 scale to be considered for the all-academic team. Tony Dungy, quarterback of Minnesota. Chris, are we ever going to hear that name again?
That depends. I mean, I know there's a lot of quarterback. I mean, hey, maybe he'll end up going to Seattle or Tampa in the expansion draft.
Yeah. But wait a minute, going back to education being important, and I think during the 1990s, high school developed a high standard. If you wanted to practice, play, and receive athletic scholarship as a freshman, you need a 2.0 GPA or higher in at least 13 core courses in high school, as well as the corresponding minimum score on your ACT or your SAT.
It's funny, Chris, that you mentioned maybe Dungy goes to Tampa or Seattle. Of course, famously, we know that one day Dungy will go to Tampa Bay and will help turn them around, but not as a quarterback. NFL transactions. Kansas City has waived fullback Morris LeGrand of Tampa to make room for punter Jim McCann. We had that yesterday. It's weird that. We didn't know that they had waived Morris LeGrand though. So they're keeping Gerald Wilson on roster, and have just signed Jim McCann. All right, here we go. The big game in the Southwestern Conference: Texas A&M versus Arkansas. The Razorbacks smoke the Aggies 31-6. Texas A&M's number 2 ranking, and they couldn't beat the Razorbacks, who were 8-2. A&M had everything to play for: an outright conference title, a berth in the Cotton Bowl versus Georgia, a possible national title if Ohio State slips up. But 9 fumbles, 5 turnovers, and a Hogs touchdown just seconds before halftime opened the floodgates as a 7-0 game turned lopsided, all but wrecked the Aggie hopes. The Southwestern Conference instead is a 3-way tie, and it's the Hogs, thanks to a tiebreaker of having a Cotton Bowl drought in comparison, get the nod to play the Bulldogs in Dallas. For A&M, they lost everything: an outright conference crown, a perfect record, a shot at the national title. Instead, they'll have to settle for the Liberty Bowl against USC in John McKay's college farewell game. Before I ask you the question real quick, I want to state that I had mentioned A&M going to the Governor's Cup. That's my bad. I'm confusing stuff from the touchdown of the day. That was 1950. I apologize for that mistake. 1975, they were battling for the Cotton Bowl, and as Chris said in his profile, they failed at that. Chris, Texas A&M drops a huge chance, just so much on the line in this game. They didn't even show up against Arkansas. What happened?
The touchdown before halftime, 9 fumbles, 5 turnovers. And again, if they just win this game and Ohio State slips up and it's brutal. Now, on your side, Vinny, this is your opponent. Do you feel a little nervous about playing Arkansas based on what they just did here?
Definitely, especially with plays like this. This touchdown from the touchdown in history, Eddie Meters. Arkansas destroyed A&M on the Saturday finale of the 75 regular season, and it all came to a head in the third when Aggies fumbled, and Eddie Meters recovered his second of 3 fumbles, this one for a touchdown. Charles, Eddie Meters had a game of all games on this Saturday afternoon in early December for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Could this be the potential that he could be drafted by an NFL team when his college playing days end?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if he's related to Eddie Meter, the former Rams safety, but hey, we'll see if he turns out as good as his namesake did.
Maybe.
And again, as I said, if Meters plays all 4 years and does not go pro, then he's going to have a career and degree to as a backup.
That wasn't the only college football game on this day, as Tennessee tops the Rainbow Warriors 28-6. Hawaii looked like a team that had spent all their energy last week in their comeback versus San Jose State. Stanley Morgan had a day to remember, though. 201 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, one of them a 63-yard punt return for the touchdown, as Morgan led Tennessee topples Hawaii in the grid finale. Now, Charles, Hawaii ended San Jose's season at being perfect, and then they run smack into the Volunteers of Tennessee, who survived the flight to Hawaii.
Rainbows the previous week, that was their Rose Bowl when they upset my Spartans.
And I know you got to be wondering, Charles, where was this a week ago?
I said that was their Rose Bowl, though. They wanted to ruin the Spartans. And
by the way, also Vinny, just remember that name, Stanley Morgan.
Yep. All right, now we move on to Sunday, December 7th, and we're going to talk about NFL action. We start with the Browns and Steelers. Big AFC Central battle as Pittsburgh brings the curtain down on Cleveland 31-17. When these teams met up in Week 2, it was a complete and utter humiliation for the Browns, 42-6 at home. Today, riding a 2-game winning streak, they shockingly led the 18-point favorite Steelers 17-7 at Three Rivers. However, the roof fell in thanks to 24 unanswered points and 4 Cleveland turnovers. But between their upset of Cincinnati and admirable efforts against last year's AFC Championship game teams, maybe there is light at the end of the Browns' tunnel. For the Steelers, it's simple. Beat Cincinnati next week to clinch everything in the AFC or risk potentially blowing a division against the Rams team playing for seeding. Charles, the Browns, they played well, but the Steelers are just too powerful, too much for Cleveland this year.
That because the Steelers are pretty good tandem offensively with Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris. And of course, we said this many times in previous podcasts, the Steel Curtain defense is second to none.
We got this is the touchdown that gives Cleveland a lead, as defending world champion Pittsburgh gave up a wild touchdown that resulted in the Browns having a 10-point halftime lead. After the Browns scored their first touchdown, Pittsburgh stumbled and fumbled the ball, as you see there. And Browns rookie Willie Miller scoops it up, brings it back 17 yards. It's not often, Chris, that you can kick the ball off and score on the same play.
I guess you could say for Cleveland, it was Miller time.
Everything, like beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
And by the way,
44,
remember,
he actually knocks the ball loose himself and then just doesn't recover it. And this is
the Browns
good enough for the Follies.
And again, remember, Cleveland had been utterly humiliated in the first game against Pittsburgh. Give them credit. At least they showed up this time.
Yes.
Lynn Swann's second touchdown of the day gives the Steelers the lead, and it's a more conventional touchdown than what we just saw, as the Steelers had clawed their way back in the second half, tied Cleveland up before getting the ball back again and hitting this Terry Bradshaw to Lynn Swann for 18 yards.
Would you say that 74 draft class is working out well for Pittsburgh? Swan, Stallworth, Mike Webster, Jack Lambert?
Well, we're only a year into it, but at this point, it might be the greatest draft of the 70s, if not perhaps even more. Moving on, so Pittsburgh gets a big win. Well, it's the Jets and Patriots. Time to talk about this game as New York is less terrible than New England, 30-28. In a battle of 2-9 versus 3-8, something had to give. It was Gang Green who won this battle of bad by rushing for 205 yards and forcing 5 turnovers. The Jets have nothing else going to their Monday night game at San Diego with whatever can be considered a semblance of momentum. As for the Patriots, not even John Havlicek can save this team right now. Charles, do we care about this game?
No, and Chuck Fairbanks, the coach of the Patriots, is probably wondering, I love Oklahoma State for this?
And like I said, the Jets were less terrible. Although don't tell that to this dude.
John Riggins. The Jets are diesel powered. In this third quarter, John Riggins' 37-yard run gave the Jets a 20-7 lead over the Patriots. It's a bruising assault on the Patriots and shows his speed and power as the mohawked, hair-cutted John Riggins just plows through, over, and by past the Patriots.
So weird to see him because when you think John Riggins, you always think of the Washington. It's weird seeing him wear green.
Yep. Tremendous run, however, on this afternoon. Colts and Giants. Well, it once was an NFL championship game, but not today, as Baltimore corrals the Giants 21-0. After Burt Jones' hot hand carried them through November, the sack pack came through on this day. 8 sacks of Craig Morton, 4 takeaways, and a pick 6. Regardless of what happens in the Buffalo-Miami game later, the red-hot Colts are now in control of their own destiny in the AFC. Charles, who would have seen this coming when the season began, that the Colts would be the team in charge of the AFC East?
Very shocking after a 2-12 record, good this past year. But like the Patriots this year, the Colts have snuck up on a lot of teams. They're playing with house money.
And remember, they'll get their shot at Miami next week.
Right.
And they've already split with Buffalo.
Correct.
The Redskins versus the Falcons. Washington outlasts Atlanta 30-27. Both teams are coming off wild games last week with opposite results. And this week they had another barn burner. Bill Kilmer overcame a broken bone in his left foot to throw 3 touchdowns. So did Steve Bartkowski in what may have been the number 1 overall pick's coming out party. The Falcons did everything but KO Washington's playoff hopes as they survived on a field goal with 2 seconds remaining. It was the 5th time in 6 weeks a Skins game was decided in overtime or the final 5 seconds. Chris, the over-the-hill game have won a lot of games throughout the early to mid-70s now, but is this perhaps the end of the line for all those guys in their 30s?
Feels like it, but it's also kind of weird seeing them score a lot of points. They scored 30 against Dallas, 31 against Minnesota, 30. Everyone talks about the defense, but the offense has been actually coming to a forefront recently.
So this is earlier in the game as the Redskins tie the game up against Atlanta with a long bomb. Bill Kilmer hits Frank Grant on a 69-yard scoring drive as Grant marches on Washington, his own team, for the score.
Kenny, as a Falcons fan, what do you make of these last 2 weeks? They barely lose to Oakland, they barely lose to Washington. You think the Falcons have maybe found something?
They find some ways to get potentially through it. Looking ahead, especially with Steve Bartkowski playing the way he did, there's a chance that the future could be bright in Atlanta.
And again, they were huge underdogs against these teams. You take what you can get at this point.
Vikings versus the Packers. Minnesota packs up Green Bay 24-3. The Vikings had to come from behind in round 1 versus the Packers at Lambeau Field. Today was a breeze thanks to the power of 3. 3 touchdowns by Fran Tarkenton, 3 sacks, and 3 takeaways. With a new playoff format, no longer a set rotation, but rather one of seeding, Minnesota is just 1 win away of their final 2 games for home field advantage, but both are on the road. Charles, the Vikings are trying to invite the rest of the NFC up to frozen, frigid Bloomington. How much worried should teams like Los Angeles and Dallas and St. Louis be if they've got to travel north to Bloomington?
Probably very worried, especially the Rams and Cowboys, who are not accustomed to playing in cold weather in December time, whereas the Purple People Eaters are.
And don't forget, St. Louis lost at Minnesota last year.
And of course, with Tarkenton leading the way on offense, that's incredible.
And by the way, he
You think of Chuck Forming as a bruising runner, but here he catches a pass from Fran Tarkenton as they take a 14-0 lead on Green Bay at the frigid Metropolitan Stadium. 32 yards across the middle. He breaks the tackle and rumbles the rest of the way for the score.
I got to mention Chuck Foreman. He was a great pass catcher as a running back. Charles, you could consider him as maybe a Christian McCaffrey 50 years earlier. He was very
Maybe.
McCaffrey-ish.
Chuck Foreman.
Just looking at what we got left. Okay.
Chuck Foreman.
How about this game? The Chargers and the Chiefs. San Diego stuns Kansas City 28-20. Today was finally the Chargers' day. Kansas City fumbled the opening kickoff, had 4 turnovers, and couldn't even hold a fourth quarter lead thanks to 247 yards rushing. For the Chiefs, 1975 was the definition of confusing. Beat Oakland and Dallas, lose at home to a winless San Diego. There will be no winless team, and one has to wonder if a team ever will go 0 for the season, Charles. San Diego got on the win column. How happy are they down in the Southern California
Very
region?
happy. And what kind of home that no team ever goes the season when winless? You have to feel for that team if that ever happens.
50 years later, Chargers beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead again.
Yes, it's appropriate that we're doing it today. Rams versus Saints. LA makes sinners out of New Orleans 14-7. In spite of 4 turnovers, the Rams put together 14 points without an offensive touchdown. How'd they do it? A safety, a fumble, return, scoop, and score, and 2 field goals. Week after week, the Aints seem to be inventing new and creative ways to lose games. Chris, the New Orleans Saints, they can't get out of their way for nothing.
And they don't have the schedule excuse of Cleveland, and San Diego at least has Dan Fouts. The way the Saints are playing, maybe they would have been better off in Tulane Stadium.
And Katie Stengel was manager of the Mets. He said, "I've been in this game 100 years, but I've seen new ways to lose. I've never seen imaginable." That's the Saints right now.
Let's take a look at this wild touchdown in the Superdome as the Los Angeles Rams get a wild punt return that may go down as a fumble return. After the return man fumbles, reserve linebacker Jim Peterson picks up the loose football and goes 67 yards for the score. It's 85 total yards, as this is the only touchdown the Rams scored in the game, but with a safety and 2 field goals, it was enough to win and beat New Orleans on this day.
Think about what the Saints have done. They get blown out at Oakland. They blow a lead against Cleveland. It's like, what's next? What else are the Saints going to do?
Let's take a look when this comes back around. Nope, it moved up. It's weird.
Hey, the Saints want to pack up their bag and go home and forfeit the next game if that's all you got. I mean, that's brutal.
Their last 2 games, their last 2 games, by the way, Charles, Giants and Bears. Maybe they just should.
And now notice how nobody seems to want to actually pick the ball up, and it just squirts free. Jim Peterson is Johnny on the spot, and the Saints are not going to catch him.
Vinny, that is reminiscent of Troy Brown and the Jets Patriots 1995, what you just did as a touchdown of the day. Didn't that remind you of that?
Yes, a little bit. Exactly. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a return. It goes down as a fumble return officially in the record book, but it is a special teams return touchdown regardless. Lions and Bears. Well, the Chicago surprised Detroit 25-21. The Lions' wildcard hopes have been knocked for a loop in the recent weeks. Today, they were officially extinguished as Walter Payton scored 2 touchdowns. 3 weeks ago, this was a 6-3 team. Now they have to beat Minnesota and St. Louis to salvage a winning record. Charles, the Lions go from 6-3 to 6-6 in just 3 weeks. The roof has collapsed, and they just moved into the Silverdome.
I guess these Lions were cowardly and didn't have the courage to stand tall in a full season.
It all goes back to that extra point miss against Kansas City. If he makes that extra point, they're 7-5. Ever since that missed extra point and the loss at KC, everything that can go wrong has gone wrong.
Think about this, and I'll bring this up every year they missed the playoffs. Their last playoff game was a 5-0 loss in 1970 to the Cowboys, and they're not going back at 75 to redeem themselves from that embarrassing debacle.
And the Red Wings aren't even that good anymore. It's like, what does Detroit have at this point?
And the Tigers lost 105 games this year, including 19 in a row.
And the Pistons, woof.
I don't think Joe Louis is still boxing, so there's not a lot going on in Detroit. But Northern Michigan is in the Division II playoffs, championship game. Cowboys versus Cardinals. St. Louis douses Dallas 31-17. This was for first place in the NFC East. The rematch to their wild and woolly 37-31 overtime affair in week 2. Today was a different story. The Cowboys just didn't show up as they fell behind 28-3 at halftime and were never really in it. Jim Hart threw 3 touchdowns as the Cardinals moved a step closer to another division crown. Dallas, meanwhile, has their backs up against the wall. A loss next week, Saturday, to Washington would knock them out of the playoffs for a second straight year. Charles, Dallas missing the playoffs in 74 was a abnormal stat, but it could become the norm as St. Louis knocks them for a loop today.
Wow. I think it's up for grabs. NFC East. Dallas had to get their act together these next 2 weeks, or they're going to be on the outside looking in for the second year in a row.
And remember, Washington already beat them earlier this year.
Chris, Jim Hart's 3 touchdown passes, you could say, was a solid Hart foundation of passing.
Oh, exactly. He was a real, you could say the Cowboys looked like an anvil dropped on them.
Oilers versus 49ers. Houston subdues San Francisco 27-13. Even though the Oilers' playoff hopes have been doused by Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, they still had something to play for. Their first winning season since the merger. Houston got it thanks to 3 different running backs scoring touchdowns against a team that had upset the Rams. Houston held San Francisco to only 5 rushing yards. Charles, what needs to change in San Francisco?
A new quarterback. That's how. Especially if the one we have now is going to be lost in the expansion draft.
5 rushing yards.
Chris, 5 rushing yards. I mean, that's just the epitome of disaster for the 49ers.
You don't need a running back or two. If that performance is pitiful.
I think Charles ran for more rushing yards today than the Niners did in that game.
Well, here's the big game. The Bills versus the Dolphins, and Miami circles the wagons, the Buffalo Wagons, 31-21. Everything was lining up for the Bills. 2 straight wins. Miami had been on a recent skid and was playing this game with third-string quarterback Don Strock. Instead, it was worst-case scenario. 21-0 Dolphins lead as Strock was as efficient, 12-15 for 2 touchdowns. But Joe Ferguson, with throwing 2 touchdowns and O.J. Simpson en route to 117 receiving yards, it was 24-21. When Buffalo recovered Mercury Morris's fumble, it looked like they were about to turn the tables in Miami from late October with a late comeback off a turnover. Then disaster struck. Not only did the referee rule it was not a fumble, the Bill who recovered said the ball was penalized for what was said to be roughing the official. Either way, the Dolphins kept the ball, scored, knocked Buffalo out of the playoffs, and made it 12 straight wins versus them, period. For Miami, they can win their 5th straight division title if they win at Baltimore next week. For Buffalo, with O.J. Simpson having a year like this and an offense as good as any in the AFL, they somehow still couldn't beat the Dolphins. With no Zonka, no Kick, no Warfield, and even here, no Greasy and no Morrill. Between the interception in round 1 and Fumblegate in round 2, the Bills at this rate may need an exorcist to beat Miami. Chris, they haven't won since 1969. It's now officially 12 in a row, and this time the refs beat them. What do you think of that mess?
I mean, there's just something about Don Shula. It just seems like good things come his way. Like Buffalo held their number, but that ever since he showed up, it's just like nothing goes their way. It's like it's just something about Don Shula, man. There's just an aura. It seems like bad luck follows.
We have some favoritism toward Don Shula and the Dolphins.
I guess the NFL just thinks, hey, Miami, Oakland, Pittsburgh every year, they love reruns. And boy, think about it. You start 4-0, and the sad part is, Vinny, even if there was a second wild card, they'd still be up against it because of the Oilers and Bengals.
Let's see if we can get to the point of the fumble.
I thought when the Bills they also where are the Ghostbusters when you need them?
Well, this is the touchdown that sealed it. That's it. All right. Let's see. Okay, we'll get through this Joe Ferguson pass. This is one of the long touchdowns.
By the way, here's the irony. O.J. Simpson had under 100 rushing yards, but he still had 100 receiving yards anyway. Go figure.
So that's the one of the long O.J. touchdowns that made it 24-21. And the Dolphins, 9:23 left, get the ball back. And usually we don't go into team highlights like this, but when something as controversial as this happens, we need to take a look at it as the Buffalo mascot is headbutting the goalpost. All right, here we go.
Wow, he even made the trip.
Strzok hands off to Morris. Okay, I wish I could see another angle. I could see where if Morris's head hit, yes, it's not a fumble, but
Issue the running into the official. What apparently happened was Tume apparently made contact with the referee while he was trying to recover the fumble. What do you call that?
well, let me take a look at it again. No, this is after. Oh, okay, I got to back up. Sorry. The very next play, or the very next highlight, anyway. Not Bulesh goes.
Sheriff of, and not even the sheriff of Nottingham did you, and it's the other guy.
Okay, let's take a look one more time. Morris. Yeah, it's very hard to tell from that angle. So they're calling that number 65 right there, running into the official. That is complete and utter uh, Bill Hunky. That is not. I mean, he thought the play was still alive. I'll talk about that when the week is over, the 10 days is over. Charles, what do you think of that
Well,
play?
That was a bizarre play. I talk about the controversial play there, and the touchdown that broke the Bills' back.
oh yeah, I mean, maybe this isn't quite Mel Gray against Washington, but Vinny, would you say this was a bigger controversy than the Mel Gray Phantom touchdown or not?
Well, okay, the Mel Gray Phantom touchdown put the game in overtime. This one potentially stopped Buffalo from winning. And as we're going to see in years to come, there's a lot of ways the Bills will stop themselves from beating Miami. They did not need the refs' assist. All right. I will talk about that to wrap up that'll be my essay at the end, which is something I'm going to introduce with this episode. Sports Illustrated come out on Monday, and of course, Sports Illustrated is usually a week behind with its cover photo. Here is Bubba Bean of Texas A&M as A&M stakes its claim, shredding Texas. Charles, is unfortunate that when the cover comes out, A&M has already lost their task for an undefeated season.
What's the SI covered James, you could say.
You definitely could say, Chris. Of course, now subscribers will get the magazine on Thursday or Friday, so they got it when A&M was still undefeated. But if you go to buy it at the newsstands, well, A&M is 10-1 and not 11-0.
When we talk about the Sports Illustrated jinx, Charles always mentions the '87 Indians, but Vinny, how about this one? Texas A&M on the cover before they get smoked.
Looking at more on Monday, the Steelers have clinched a playoff berth. They will get to defend their Super Bowl title in the tournament themselves, as Bradshaw hooked up with Lynn Swann for 2 third-period touchdowns to aid in their victory over Cleveland. We've already talked about the game, but just officially announced that they have clinched a playoff spot. All right, looking at tonight, or not, excuse me. The Rams' Charlie Cowan, thrives in anonymity. Now, he's not somebody we've talked about, the New Mexico Highland graduate 15 years ago, but he has been playing over 200 games in the NFL, Charles. He's been a staple on the Rams, back from their fearsome foursome days all the way now through their runs at the NFC West Championships. Charlie Cowan is one of the players that you don't hear about, but the NFL teams need.
He's been around as long as he's been. I think he's at Blue. Would you believe he?
Pretty good. They're seem to play pretty well when the spotlight's not on them. He said he thrives in anonymity.
By the way, 15 years. He's like the Rams version of Jim Marshall, minus the wrong way.
If you want to look at some other college scores from college basketball, Saturday's college scores, I included that because there's not a lot of football in college to talk about. But here is, first of all, an interesting thing as Rattler quarterback Robert Pattinson directs traffic. The Grizzlies get city backing in an NFL bid. Memphis, Tennessee is the National Football League ready to accept as one of its own, the team that lured Larry Zonka and Paul Warfield and Jim Kick to the ill-fated World Football League is applying for membership in the NFL. We know the NFL is expanding in 76 with Seattle and Tampa Bay. Could an inclusion of Memphis be along for the ride, Chris?
Well, it would make the question. Well, if nothing else, when you look at the geography, that's a potential rival for maybe Houston, maybe Atlanta. Vinny, you're a Falcon fan. What do you think of potentially Atlanta, Memphis twice a year?
It makes for natural rivalries, especially when you figure Atlanta's in the NFC West. So maybe a little bit of realignment with Tampa Bay joining. I know they're going to be in the AFC in 76, and Seattle will be in the NFC, and then they'll switch flip flop in 77 before they settle into their permanent divisions. Not sure why the NFL is doing that, but we'll talk about that more in 76. All right. Big story. Possible tampering in the NFL. This is a big story on Monday as the Jets have given Tampa the caution flag. Cocktail party scene. Pete Rozelle and Phil Iceland huddled in the corner. The commissioners cautioning the Jet owner that tampering rules must be observed in a treasure hunt for a coach. The Jets are interested in Chuck Knox, who has a year to go on the LA contract. Rams owner Carol Rosenblum has just left the hospital after heart trouble, so extra caution is advised. Rozelle says we always go through proper channels, or I'm sorry, Iceland says we always go through possible channels. And then how about they trade Joe Namath for Chuck Knox, has said. Chris, Chuck Knox to the Jets?
Why would he leave? I mean, he's got the last thing Los Angeles needs is another coaching situation. Look, what we just went through this with John McKay. The Rams, LA already went through this with John McKay. They don't need another one of these situations.
Charles, the Rams have a good quarterback in James Harris. Would they really want aging Joe Namath and his brittle knees?
No.
And by the way, they already have Ron Jaworski as the backup just in case. I mean, they could always go to Jaworski if, God forbid, something happens to Harris. Why would they need Namath?
You can win. You can join this football contest through the Miami Herald and the Miami News. First prize $75, second $50, third is $25 in the December 8th Miami Herald and Miami News official order form. You check the winners. And this tiebreaker indicates the scores you think these teams will make. The Dolphins, Colts, Jets, and San Diego. Why did Miami's newspapers not include Buffalo with the rest of the AFC East? But enter the
I think that's how I think maybe Miami just doesn't take them seriously.
Charles, the Raiders and Broncos are on TV tonight, Monday Night Football. The game will be played on Channel 10 and 12 in South Florida. However, it's a big game in the AFC as far as potential seeding goes with the Raiders, whether they can catch Pittsburgh for the 1 seed. Can the Broncos play spoiler tonight?
All depends.
Now, Denver did win at Oakland last year, so take that for what it's worth.
All right, my alma mater was honored for the 1975 season. I want to talk about my high school alma mater right now, Saranac Lake, in the heart of the Adirondacks. Is John Muldowney, who was one of my coaches when I played of Saranac Lake High School, was selected that weekend by the Herald American to appear on their second team All-Upstate Stars. The Redskin linebacker previously received the honors in 74 when he was chosen All-Northern Gridiron team. Muldowney's knowledge and defensive strategy has carried over as the ball hawk leads the Redskin basketball squads in steals as well. 1975 was Saranac Lake's first NAC conference championship, by the way, and they were the 75, 76, and 77 teams were inducted into the Saranac Lake High School Hall of Fame in 2023. I was inducted the following year with my I was a member of the 1995 Saranac Lake Redskins that were inducted in 2024. So just
Hail to the Redskins.
Yep.
Hail to the other Redskins.
All right, Charles.
Pigskin.
Charles, the Peanuts are back in the comics with more football.
Yep, as Marcy against Peppermint Patty once again.
I don't know anything about.
I don't know anything about football, sir. It's simple, Mars. I go out for a pass and you just throw to me. You got a little further down the field, Marcy.
Well, Charles, we talked about in the last one that Marcy might be a good linebacker. Evidently, she will not be the quarterback you need in San Francisco.
And yet Trey asked Marcy to be quarterback. It's kind of like asking Charlie Brown to be the place kicker.
It's also
Fun.
or like asking the Saints to win.
All right, Broncos
Yeah,
versus
right.
Raiders as Oakland beats Denver 17-10. Last year, the Broncos won at the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. There would be no repeat on Monday night. A stage the Raiders have only lost once in 6 years. Oakland's defense, shaky last week versus Atlanta, made amends this week with 10 sacks and 4 interceptions of 2 Bronco quarterbacks. In what has become football's most predictable division, Oakland locked up their 4th straight AFC West title. For the Broncos, after consecutive winning seasons, they can do no better than 500 this year. Outside of New England, they have been the most disappointing team of 1975. Charles, the Raiders are going back to the playoffs again. How about this game, this defensive battle that they win?
It was a key game for the Oakland Raiders, and the Raiders usually won more games than anybody in the NFL over the last 9-10 years. That brass ring is still eluding them because of teams like Miami and Pittsburgh.
And don't forget Baltimore in 19.
Yep.
This is the only touchdown that was included in the Raiders team highlight film. This third quarter 1-yard run by Raiders Pete Banachak gives the Raiders a 14-3 lead over Denver and solidified their 10th win on Monday night. Their 10th of the season.
By the way, Vinny, Pete Banachak, this ties into our last podcast when Marv Hubbard was put on the injured reserve, and this is the guy who had to step up as a replacement.
We end Monday, December 8th with some sad news as Gene Alford, wingback, defensive back, blocking back, and fullback for the Portsmouth Spartans from 1931 to 33, the Cincinnati Reds in 1933, and the St. Louis Gunners in 1934, has passed away. There is no obituary that I could find in the newspaper, so just real quick go to he was born on April 3rd, 1905 in Rising Star, Texas through and through. He passed away in the state in Houston on December 8th as he played at Texas Tech and Sul Ross State before going on to the NFL.
Texas
he was
born.
a member. He
Texas,
was a member of that 1925.
Texas.
No, he was not. He played for the Spartans in 31 and 32.
Texas born and Texas bred all the way.
Yep.
New cover photo as we hit another Tuesday, and this time it's the St. Louis Cardinals walking off the field after their victory over the Dallas Cowboys.
What do you think of this one? I found this one of Hart, Metcalf, and Gray, and Roger Worley.
Some big names that have been involved in a lot of St. Louis's victories this week. We haven't talked much about Roger Worley, but of course we've mentioned Jim Hart, the arm of the South, and of course Metcalf and Gray as well. Oh man!
It's a win by them, and
okay. Whew. I thought I had backed us all the way out. Nope, I did. Okay, let me pause real quick. No, I can't pause. I'll just edit this part out. I gotta scroll back down. We're so close to being done too. About 50 minutes in or so.
You're gonna stop all the games.
Okay, there we go. That wasn't so bad. Okay. So we'll just edit back to here. It is now December 9th. Is the NFL aware of how bad the officiating is, especially as a Bills fan? Ralph Wilson is now at odds with the officiating. Will replays remedy the officiating problem? Chris, can television technology make the NFL better?
I think it can't make it any worse because you think about between this and the Mel Gray thing. Remember, instant replay was introduced on television in 1963 in the Army-Navy game. And, first Mel Gray, now this. I mean, it's not like the playoffs are going to have a controversial call, right?
Charles, it's amazing that 50 years later, we're still talking about the officiating in the NFL, even though technology has changed and improved things a lot. But game officials in the NFL can make or break a season, especially with one call going the wrong way in an important time in an important game.
Yes, unfortunately.
And again, look at Washington. If that Mel Gray touchdown is not a touchdown, then Washington and St. Louis, then basically Washington is essentially in poise for the division because they would have swept the Cardinals. Think about the importance of that.
Here's an opinion piece in the Buffalo Evening News. Shula Thomas, make it happen. Did you ever notice that this is Steve Weller, by the way, did you ever notice that a large percentage of movers and shakers in the National Football League are concentrated in a rather limited area, the metropolitan boundaries of Miami and Baltimore? That Miami is involved is no revelation. Don Shula established himself as a huge enchilada some time ago. That Baltimore is included is mind-boggling, even though it probably shouldn't be. Joe Thomas had an excellent reputation as a builder of football teams when he went to Baltimore and disappeared in the cloud of dust created by the falling bodies of all those famous old Colts he dumped. I don't recall the exact words, but I'm sure chuckled at Thomas' heavy-handed pruning of such household words as Johnny Unitas, Tom Mackey, and John Mackey, and his total lack of tact in explaining his moves. Probably the nicest words he used to describe any of the dumpies were old and over the hill. Guys, Baltimore is survived because of those moves. It didn't look good at the beginning, but honestly, sometimes tough moves have to be made, Charles, in order to get a team back to where they were.
Yes. And no player is spared.
And now look at the Colts had all those old glory heroes. Now look at how young. Now remember, the 75 Colts are one of, if not the youngest team in football.
Well, we've got some bad news to talk about. On December 9th, as a former college football star, his brother and 2 accomplices were sentenced Monday to 24 months in prison for conspiring to smuggle marijuana and violating United States currency laws. U.S. District Judge William O'Merton sentenced Tommy Warren, former Florida State University star and one-time assistant to Governor Reuben Askew, his brother John L. Warren Jr., and David Defina and D.E. Schick. The 4 were convicted by the jury last month, and Judge Marin sentenced them to 18 months on the drug charges and 6 months on the currency counts. They were also placed on parole for 2 years. We are going to be talking a lot about NFL and prison and arrests and stuff as we continue on. This is just one of many times that gridiron stars are going to get in trouble.
And also rampant drug use in the NFL and all sports in particular.
All right, let's take a look at the standings now after Week 12 in the NFL, as the Minnesota Vikings have clinched the NFC Central and are currently your number 1 seed. Los Angeles, holders of the NFC Western crown once again. Our number 2, St. Louis, has moved into 3rd, and Dallas is your wild card. Dallas would go to Minnesota.
No, Washington. I know it's no Washington's the wild card. Remember, they beat the Cowboys in November.
Okay, so
and St. Louis in first place at 9-3.
Yep. So this actually, the newspaper is out of order here. So the Redskins would be going to Minnesota, and the Cardinals to Los Angeles. Better climate for the Cardinals than last week when they were potentially headed to Minnesota. In the AFC,
absolutely.
In the AFC, Pittsburgh is still your 1 seed. Oakland has clinched the AFC West. They are your 2 seed. Miami controls the AFC East for now. Your wild card is Cincinnati, but don't forget Baltimore is still potentially in the hunt. Buffalo is eliminated by virtue of their 2 losses to Miami. Chris, as things change, they still seem the same in the AFC.
Miami, Pittsburgh, Oakland. Man, the NFL really could use some new blood. I mean, I know they're great franchises, but at some point, you can only see Don Shula and Ken Stabler so many times in the playoffs. I mean,
and complimented Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris.
Like I said, think about it, Charles. Like, wasn't there a stretch when baseball had pretty much the same teams every October around this time?
Yeah, the Global Orioles. As a matter of fact, there were only 14 teams that made the playoffs in the 70s in baseball.
A little bit of NFL transactions here is starting right guard for the Philadelphia Eagles, Bill Luke, underwent surgery for removal of lateral cartilage in his left knee.
Nothing is going right for the Eagles.
Charles, before we end this December 9th, we've got more peanuts from the peanut gallery. More.
Yep, and again, Marcy and Peppermint. I've been reading up on football, so when you first play, I didn't know anything about it. That's all changed. Now I'm ready to get out there and kick around the old hawk skin.
Good old Marcy. It's getting it right, but yet still wrong.
Correct, sir.
All right, we got more NFL injuries as 2 more Broncos hurt. We're in that Raider contest. We've been talking about injuries all of 1975. And the Oakland Raiders won, but the Denver Broncos had some injuries as quarterback Charlie Johnson and running back Otis Armstrong will be out with injuries. Tight end Boyd Brown and guard Carl
Rockowicz.
Broken legs. Wow.
By the way, Denver.
we know we're never going to eliminate injuries in football, but it just always makes you sad to hear something like that, a broken leg, especially coming on 50 years later on a day Patrick Mahomes suffered his first season-ending injury of his NFL career.
By the way, I also mentioned the article Broncos most injured team in 1975, which is a big reason after back-to-back winning seasons. The injury bug has bitten the Broncos hard.
In other words, the Denver Broncos spent more time on the 4077 of the mass unit than on the gridiron.
Passing away on December 9th, 1975, is Carl Schwett, linebacker, center, and defensive back for the Buffalo Bills of the Double AFC from 1948 to 49 and the Green Bay Packers 1950 to 51. Schwett was just 50 years old, former professional football player and defensive line coach at Harvard, died of cancer yesterday at Harvard Stillman University. Some more sad news.
Also, oh, by the way, Vinny, he was not only on those that 48 championship team for Buffalo, he also coached Saskatchewan at one point in the CFL.
Yes, he did. So he was involved in all sorts of football throughout his life, and of course, working at Harvard. All right, December 10th, our last day. Meanwhile, real quick, before we advance, I missed something on the 7th that I want to point out. December 7th, 1975, although also being the 34th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, was also my father's 23rd birthday. December 10th, 1975, my mother-in-law was turning 12 at the time. So happy birthday to them in 1975. Right. NFL office plays it cool, but Ralph Wilson and the NFL is feuding over what happened between the Buffalo Bills and the officials on Sunday, and Ralph Wilson's not happy about it. Charles, we talked about this play. We've talked about it over and over, but it's still in the news come Wednesday. It's not over with yet. Ralph is not letting it go. It literally knocked the Bills out of the playoffs.
I am not signing players or from the folded WFL.
Yep.
Although remember,
Chris, you mentioned the St. Louis Stars, but one thing that is interesting is St. Louis fullback Jim Otis is nearing 1,000 yards. An emotional Jim Otis. Not your typical star running back in the NFL these days, but yet he's still hanging around.
Again, he's like the forgotten guy because all those guys I mentioned, your Hart, your Grays, your Metcalfs, even Deerdorf and Dobler are very well known. And again, Roger Worley, future Hall of Famer, he's like the magnificent seventh, if you will.
Charles, Miami's hopes ride on this man as Don Strock is the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins heading toward the playoffs.
Well, they're able to beat Buffalo low. We'll see if they're able to beat the Baltimore Colts. If they can do that, they're in the playoffs.
Now remember, that's going to be in Baltimore. He got to play at the Orange Bowl. Let's see how he does on the road. A little different on the road.
Chris, Bills owner demands the referee be dismissed. He knows he's risking a heavy fine when he called for the removal of the National Football League official who made the controversial call on Monday in the Buffalo-Miami game. Chris, this is looking more like a soap opera than the NFL at this point.
I think it's the fashion of it because remember when they lost the first game, Ralph Wilson wasn't, it was just an interception. But here's the quote: it says he should be fired from his job and never allowed to work another game. I will not again send my team out to play a game that he's working. He said he'd be fine. I don't care what Roselle does. It was a rotten call that cost our team for a chance to win the Super Bowl. Toomey said, quote, he hardly hit him. I was just trying to get the ball which rolled behind him. Saban said it should have been called a fumble, although maybe it wasn't ruled a fumble. Oh, geez. So not only is it not ruled a fumble, it's like, yeah, I think I'm starting to see it. It's not like, oh, it was a fumble, because if it was ruled a fumble, they would have just lost a couple of yards for running into the official.
So this is headlinesman Jerry Berg. Is a man that ruled that the ball dropped by Mercury Morris after he was hit was not a fumble, and then penalized the Bills 15 yards after he said defensive end Pat Toomey brushed him. Toomey said he was going after the ball.
I think I'm starting to see the issue because had they ruled it a fumble, they would have just lost a couple of yards for running into the official. I think I'm starting to see what the issue was.
Local grid stars Saranac Lake again. One more mention to them as 3 other local gridiron stars have been named to the All Upstate team. Receiving honorable mention are Saranac Lake's John Falvey, Jim Shortell, and Rick Totola of Tupper Lake. Rounds out the area recipients. Now, these are men I don't know, unlike John Muldowney, who I mentioned earlier, but congrats to them, 50th anniversary of their awards. All right, let's wrap December 10th up, Charles, with some peanuts, and this one's a little harder to read. I'll try and do my best here.
I'll try.
Amateur kick it over your head, so.
What if I kick? Let me try. What if I kick it over your head, sir? What if some major league scout spots me and hires me for a team, and I have to go to the Super Bowl? What would I do about school? Just shut up, Morris, and kick the ball. Don't be impatient with me, sir.
Well, there are definitely some teams that could use a good punter. Maybe Kansas City right now, as Gerald Wilson is injured. Okay, and as always, we finish each day with any obituaries. John Bettridge, fullback for the Chicago Bears, 1937, and the Cleveland Rams in the same year, passed away at the age of 65. He also played for Ohio State, and he was a gridiron at Sandusky High School, where he played. He was a retired employee at Ohio Department of Liquor Control.
By the way, how about he said 27 touchdowns in 1929 alone? How about that? 27 touchdowns in 1 year. In 29.
Okay, that is the 11th, so we are officially through the 10 days. So let's go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to talk real quick about my thoughts on what's going on in the NFL in 1975 with officiating, and it continues to this day, even with instant replay being what it is, and changing and making technology better. We still have controversial calls. We still have things that in 2025, fans get on their TikToks or YouTubes and talk about conspiracies and the game being rigged. And the NFL, year after year, seems to do nothing about it publicly while making improvements behind the scenes that a lot of fans don't even notice. However, back in 1975, there weren't the improvements yet, as replay was still over 10 years away and would be short-lived. It wasn't until 1999 that instant replay would become a full part of the NFL. What I want to talk about, obviously the changes can't be made for 1975, but these changes should go down in 2026. Make the referees accountable. Have them do post-game press conference, as the NFL players and coaches have to. When they make a mistake, they are questioned by the media. The referees never are. Most of the times we don't even know their names, especially the officials that assist the head referee. We don't know the linesman or the back judge, and a lot of times they're the ones who make these bad calls. Jim Berg is just one of thousands of referees in the in the NFL. But we have the same thing in the NBA, the MLB, and the NHL, and college sports, where referees make bad calls and are never held accountable for it. You don't know or don't hear when a referee is so bad that they do lose their job. The NFL doesn't make that public. They should. As officials who get fired, head coaches, general managers, when they don't do their job right, they're gone. As should be referees. When they don't do their job right, they should be gone, and the NFL should let the fans know, especially the fans who were aggrieved by the bad call. But the other thing is, I also want to protect the officials. We're over 50 years from this podcast topics that we're talking about, and time after time after time, we see NFL referees in the middle of a scrum. All that has been done since 1975 is move the back judge into the offensive backfield. But referees still get run over, and one of the most famous instances is in the 1995 NFL playoffs between the Packers and Cowboys, where a line judge was taken off the field on a stretcher because he was hit so hard. Referees in the NHL wear pads. Umpires in Major League Baseball wear pads. But in the NFL, they are out there in their shirts and pants, no padding. Maybe if they're smart, they wear a cup, but that's about it. So the NFL has to do both. They have to punish the referees who don't do the job right, and they have to protect the referees who are doing the job so that they can live long, natural lives. The last thing I would say about this is that when a referee gets too old, he probably should retire. NFL players, and this happens rarely, but NFL players who don't make the grade as active players after 2-3 years and are out of the leagues just disappear. Why doesn't the NFL recruit them to be referees? So we have more athletic referees out there that can keep up with these players, and if they're wearing the proper padding, take a hit and survive. Those are just my thoughts. And for Chris and Charles, until next time, we'll see you in 1975.